Okay, good morning, year 8. Do not adjust your ears. This is my voice. It's Mrs. Deutsch here with you to take us through today's learning on the new topic, Old and Middle English. So guys, if we could open up our books, today's date is Wednesday, the 16th of September, and our title is Old and Middle English. So if you guys just take a minute to write that down. Brilliant. Now, if at any point during the lesson you need more time, the lovely teacher in the room with you, feel free to pause or rewind. But otherwise, I'm going to take us through what we're looking at today. Okay, so it says here Old and Middle English. And as you know from yesterday's lesson, we're beginning to think about some new big ideas. And by the end of this topic, we would love it if you could understand the English language, that the English language has changed and evolved over time. We would really love it if you could understand that literature, so the books that we read, the poetry, the stories, offer us a window into the world and allow us to see different times and societies through the writer's eyes. So those are the two big ideas we're going to hopefully understand by the end of this topic. Because you're all brilliant at this, I know we're going to get there. So we're going to understand that English language has changed and that literature offers us a window into the world. Okay, so we're just going to pause there and you can write those down. Now, our big question then as we move on or for today is how and why language has changed over time. Now, I know you watched the brilliant video yesterday. You had your 10-minute history lesson in the history of English language, and you were completing a table to kind of take us through, and you learned some really interesting facts and ideas about the English language. You learned that Shakespeare invented the word hobnob, that the Jutes were one of the invading groups that influenced the English language, that bungalow came from India, and that words that have been created because of technological advances include words like laptop. Okay, so you did that yesterday. So we're going to build on that today by just talking to you about some other changes. So if you're ready, this is going to be on the screen. You can all see it here. I'm going to read you this text, okay? And then we're going to do some work on it. Are you ready? Brilliant. So, the history of the English language really started with the arrival of 3 Germanic tribes who invaded Britain during the 5th century AD. Okay, so we are talking about Germany when we talk about Germanic tribes. So coming over from Germany, or where Germany now is, how Germany once was, there was lots of different tribes that lived in that area. And they invaded Britain. So can you see the picture just down to the side? You can see the arrows showing them coming across the North Sea and invading. And these tribes were the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. Oh, say that quickly. The Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. And they crossed the North Sea from what today is Denmark and northern Germany. And at that time, as they were invading, the people that did live in Britain were known as the Celts, and they spoke a Celtic language. Okay, but as the invaders came across, so as the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes came across, they are actually more powerful than the Celts here. And so they used that power, they used their weaponry and their might, and they pushed the Celt speakers to the west and to the north. And that's into places that we now know are Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. So Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, where many of the Celts were pushed as the Anglos, the Saxons, and the Jutes invaded. And that's actually where we get the word England from. So the Angles came from England, and their language was called the English, from which the words England and English are derived. So that tells us that even something that's thousands of years old has an impact on how we speak. We are still England, are we not? We still are in an English lesson. So those two words have remained in our language. But as much as some words remain in our language, other words do disappear. So guys, just to get a record of that into our books. In a minute, Miss will pause or Sir will pause, and we're going to just copy and complete this summary of what we've just read. Now you can see in the blue box we've got some words to choose: Saxons, Jutes, tribes, and Angles. Okay, and there is some challenge point in a minute. But as I read you this paragraph, you're going to then copy and complete it into your book, choosing the right words to fill in the gaps. So the history of the English language really started with the arrival of three Germanic who invaded Britain during the 5th century AD. These tribes, the the and the crossed the North Sea from what today is Denmark and northern Germany. So guys, in a minute, you're going to just pause and copy that down. But it's your job to choose which of the words complete the sentences. And if you find that you do that within the time given, you can think about the challenge. Okay, so can you bullet any other moments you remember? So you could remember that the Celts were pushed. Where were they pushed to? To the north, the west, so to where Scotland and Ireland and Wales are. So you might remember that in a minute. So we're going to just press pause now. Okay, and I'm going to suggest that probably this is going to take you about 4 to 5 minutes at the most, just to get a record in our books. Off you go, guys. So, guys, when we think about this period, it's from a time called Old English. Now, guys, look at this. Doesn't it look strange? Doesn't it look unusual? Because the Old English was a hybrid. It had in it some of the language, okay, of the Celts, some of the language of the Germanic invaders. And if somebody put this in front of us now, we might find it really, really difficult to translate. But similarly, if we were stood next to somebody that was over, just working it out, 1,500 years old, they would look pretty different as well. So it's not just language that was different, but people's dress, their hair, their styles. You and I stood next to somebody 1,500 years ago, they would look unrecognizable. Okay, we would still recognize them as human. And actually, if I was going to do my best Old English, which we can only work out phonetically because I wasn't alive 1,500 years ago, it would read Pure and Fada, Bihart and Hoffenham, Sin Din Nama Galahad, Gumdin Raisi Din Villa, and Odian Swaswa und Hoffenhaman. Swil is today. Oh, just a minute. I said how strange this looks. Let's just listen to that bit again. Swil us today. Oh, can you see us and today there? They don't look too unfamiliar. Are there any words you could think of? Een diffenwala half. And forgive us. Giltas swassa we prefakt dan wit is algetad. And nilet du na us on coston. Okay, guys, I'm faking it now, really. But actually, in amongst all this strange Old English, there are 3 words that I reckon we can recognise. So, what are those words? Could you see them? Us and brilliant. What was the one that, although it looks different, when I said it, sounded familiar? Sil us today. Today. What could that be? Today. So actually, guys, we don't need to write a lot down here, but it's just to show us that actually even something that is 1,500 years old that initially looks completely different, it still has traces of our English in it. And us are 2 words that actually still are exactly the same. And and us. And they are from the Old English, and we've kept them all these years. So, guys, I just want you to pause, and I want you to write down Old English and us are words we've kept. Okay, so we're just going to say Old English is 1,500 years old, and us are words we've kept. Okay, so really the Old English, because it is the Old English, because it's so long ago, 1,500 years roughly, okay, we don't need to dwell too much on that. But this next one, Middle English, is important for us. So we're going to write as a subheading in our book, Middle English. And actually, as I read through these bullet points, there's going to be some ideas I asked you to write down. So Middle English was from 1100 to 1500 AD. And it was a period in English where new words were added and a number of spelling changes were made. Now, the reason these changes occurred, you might remember from yesterday's lesson, is because of the French. Because during this time, much of England was under French rule. So yesterday, you would have made notes on the Norman conquest. And Normandy was the old-fashioned part of France, and we were invaded by the Normans. And they came, and because they came over here with all the power and the privilege, they kind of took over the language as well. And lots of the words we sometimes still use today show that link to the French. So guys, in a minute, you're just going to pause and you're going to write down Middle English, 1100 to 15,000 AD. New words were added, spelling changes made. And I just want you to write down the first bit of the third bullet point. We owe many of these changes to the French. I don't want you to write down all of it, just that we owe many of these changes to the French. So guys, we're just going to record Middle English, 1100 to 1500 AD, new words added, spelling changes made. Many of these changes we owe to the French. So we're going to pause there and you're going to get that written down. Off you go. Okay, lovely people. So we go into this period called Middle English then. And in 1066, William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, or William Orange, part of modern France, invaded and conquered England. Now, if any of you love horrible histories, you might be more familiar with it from something like that. The new conquerors were called the Normans, and they brought with them a kind of French, bonjour, ça va, which became the language of the royal court and the ruling business classes. In other words, because they were at the top of the chain, because they were in charge and they were powerful, everything they did was considered fashionable and interesting, and other people just wanted to be like the French because they were so beautiful and they were so powerful. So they kind of inspired our language and our fashion. So for a period, there was a kind of linguistic or language class division where the lower classes spoke English, so they were using those words and us, and the upper classes spoke French. Bonjour, ça va, bien. So you could tell if you were posh because you were speaking French, and if you were poor, you were speaking English. If you had money, bonjour, I'm speaking French. If you didn't, you were speaking English. And in the 14th century, though, things began to change. And English became the dominant language in Britain again, but keeping some of the French words. So the language of the Middle English was the language of change. So the English language was merging with the French, and we had a guy called Chaucer in 1340 to 1400 using this Middle English, this poetical language, in his works. And when I saw he would never find, and you see that example up there, but look at the beautiful calligraphy they used as well. They took great pride in their handwriting because do you know what? If you could write in this era, in the Middle English period, you were so clever. It was a sign of your intelligence, a sign of your education, a sign of your class. So a lot of people trained in the art of handwriting to be another kind of notch to their bow that said, look at me. Bonjour, ça va? I am very cool, am I not? I have the handwriting and the French words. And so it was a real impressive thing. I suppose the modern equivalent would be certain people that want the designer handbag and the best car to show that they've got money, to show that they've arrived. In this time, it was your great handwriting and your French words. Okay, so what I would like you to do now, I'm just going to pause it, okay, and I would love you to just read over this and to record for yourself 3 key ideas, 3 key takeaways about this period. So you could talk about the merging of French and English. You could talk about posh people spoke French, poor people spoke English. But I just want you to write down 3 key ideas, and we'll leave it on the board. Miss might help you. Okay, 3 key things that we understand based on this lot of information.